Hey Az Nation, this is the $30,000 gamble I had to take. So for a lot of you guys that know, I own a 2009 R8 Walkinshaw Club Sport. My Club Sport is fairly unique simply because there are two turbos strapped to its 6.2 litre V8. Now, for a lot of you guys that know, one of the air filters got sucked into the turbo, damaging the turbo a little bit, absolutely destroying the air filter and potentially sending some metal through to the engine. If you don't know what metal in an engine does, it's pretty much kaboom, it is over. You can have metal do multiple things to an engine to destroy it, but if metal gets in there, it can seriously destroy a motor. Now, my motor is worth a lot of money. My car is worth a significant amount of money as well, so I thought it would be the best option of myself to take my car to a shop so they could go over the motor to make sure that everything was fine. So I took my car up to a shop and they did a leak down test and a bore scope test and a compression test. Now what these simple things are, a compression test is to see how much compression is in combustion when the cylinder comes up and is detonated with the fuel in the air. The leak down test is how much air escapes past the piston rings into the bottom block of the motor. And a bore scope test is when they take a camera down the spark plug tube and they look inside the bore and the top of the piston to analyze the motor. So when I got the information back from my car, I had both the compression test came up fine, the leak down test came up a little bit up and down, but it is expected as because this is a built motor as it is. The leak down test was a little bit up and down here and there because it is a boosted motor that was originally not a boosted motor. And also the bore scope came back fine. They couldn't find any scorches in the bores, they couldn't find any indications in the top of the piston that anything was wrong. Now this in particular performance shop didn't overly want to touch my car unless they knew that the motor was 100% fine, because for example, if there was some metal still in the system, they slapped a new turbo on it and then that metal got sucked through and popped the motor, everyone would know that they were the last people to touch the motor. So they wanted to go right into the motor and make sure everything was fine. They wanted to pull the heads off the motor, they wanted to go physically look at the bores and the pistons and make sure that there was absolutely no motor in this metal before they touched it. Now this can end in two simple ways. I was given multiple options of what I could do with the car, and these were my options and my risks and my gambles. First one was simply to put a new turbo and intercooler on the Club Sport, drive away and hope that nothing happened, maybe sell the car off and make it someone else's problem. Option number two was pull the head off, look at the bores and the pistons and see that everything was fine, put a new turbo on, new intercooler on, and everything was fine. And then the third option, which is the dreaded option, and that was pull the head off, check the piston and the bore and see that they were not fine, and you would have to fully rebuild the motor. And realistically, it came down to the last two. We either pulled the head off and everything was fine, or we pulled the head off and everything in there was not going to be fine. If we pulled the head off and everything was fine, then that would have been absolutely amazing, because all we'd have to do is put a new turbo and intercooler on it and it would have been amazing. The car would have been back to 100%. But then that laid the risk of what happens if we pull the head off and the bores are scorched and the pistons got metal in it, then what? The company gave me a handful of options. If they pulled the head off and the piston had metal in it and the bores were scorched, the motor would need to be fully rebuilt or they wouldn't touch the car at all. So if we pulled the head off and the bores were scorched, the piston had metal in it, it was going to probably cost me anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000 to rebuild the motor, because it would need a new block, pistons, and multiple other things that potentially could have been damaged throughout the process of it. Let alone it needed a new turbo and intercooler as it was anyway. So they would either pull the head off and they would either have to do the rebuild of about 20 to 30 grand. Now if they pulled the head off and there was metal in there but I didn't want to do a rebuild, they were not going to touch the car at all. They literally said that if there is metal in there, you either need to do this full rebuild and you need to do it 100% properly, no cutting corners, or we do not want anything to do with this car whatsoever. We will not touch this car. It will be given back to you as it is, pulled apart. We will not touch this car. So then it came down to the gamble that I had to take. I either needed to decide, well, if we open the motor up and it is damaged, will I be in a financial position to rebuild this full motor? And they gave me about half a day to think about it. They gave me a day to think about, can I afford it? Is it what I want to do? How long can the car be up there for? And this was one of the biggest decisions I've ever had to make, you know, because if I really wanted to, I could just leave the motor unopened, put a new turbo on it, the car was still running as it was, and sell it off and make it someone else's problem. And this was one of the bigger decisions I had to make. Now obviously the decision of selling it off was never really a decision that I was going to go for. It was all about knowing if the motor had to be rebuilt or not. Now I was fairly confident, like I had a little voice in the back of my head saying that, you know, I think it's okay, I don't know. So the next day I called them back up and I said, let's just do it, okay? I'd rather know than not know. Pull the head off, look in the bores, look at the pistons. Are you about to send me a $20,000, $30,000 bill? Or am I going to be lucky and just get away with a new turbo and a new intercooler? So they went away for the day, and I got a call later in that afternoon, and his first words were, I've got some bad news and I've got some good news. So already my decision of this $20,000 to $30,000 gamble has already made me think that, oh crap, I've got this wrong. He starts off with the bad news in simply saying that they can't replace the turbo there in the store. The turbos have to be sent over to Victoria, where they have to be assessed. They can see if they can get rebuilt, because they need to exactly figure out what turbos are on there, because they need to send both of the turbos, because the other turbo could be a little bit damaged because some of the metal coming out of the back end of the motor could have potentially damaged the exhaust turbine of the turbo. But then he came on to the good news. The bores weren't scorched, the pistons were fine, and the motor was in fine condition. It was one of the most nervous decisions that I had to make, because that's a big decision, you know. To know that you're probably going to have to spend 20 or 30 grand to get your car back on the road is not ideal. But now, just sitting here knowing that that motor is in good condition, it still does have a bad turbo sitting on it, and it will need a new intercooler. But just to know that it is fine is absolutely pleasing to know. So where do we stand with the Club Sport now? What's next for the Club Sport? Well, at the moment, I don't actually have the funds to fix the vehicle up all the way. I'll have to save up a little bit for that, because it's going to need 2 new turbos and a new intercooler, so that's going to take a bit of time. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to pull the turbos off, pull the intercooler off. I'm going to send the turbos over to Victoria, to the company that makes them. They're going to see if they can rebuild them. One of them may not need to be rebuilded. It may be fine, but I'm going to send it over there and they're going to test it. And then they're going to send them back to me, and we're going to put the 2 new turbos on and the new intercooler on, and there is probably a decent chance that what I will probably end up doing is moving the Club Sport along. Now, a lot of you guys might be wondering why I might want to sell the Club Sport, and it's pretty simple. A car like that is incredibly high maintenance, and also the fact that when you're making that sort of power, something is always going to break. And I don't know if I'm just at that age now where I don't know if I want something that's going to be breaking, you know, once every 2 or 3 months. And you know, I had that issue a lot with the Evo. I know what car I want to get next, but I'm not in a financial position to get that. I'll have to keep grinding away at my own job, and you know, keep plucking away at YouTube to see if I can ever be in a financial position to get that next car. I'm sure some of you know what car I want to get next, most of you probably don't. But just to be put in a situation where you had to decide whether you were going about to drop 20 to 30 grand on something was a big thing for me. And I really just wanted to set this video up so that you guys will know where the Club Sport was currently sitting at. The rev restriction still is in the motor, the turbo is still bad, and it does need a little bit of work on it. It is drivable, but I'm going to try to avoid driving it just in case anything else goes wrong. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video to give you guys the update of everything that was happening with the Club Sport, because I know I've been getting asked this a lot in the streams. So there it is, guys. Final updates. Turbos will be sent off to Victoria. New intercooler will go on. The rev restriction will be taken off, and then I'll probably be putting the car up on the market to move it along to either fund my house or get my next car. So guys, if you did enjoy today's video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on it. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe, guys. In the comments down below, I'm really curious to know what you guys drive. Let me know. I'm really curious. What kind of cars do you guys drive? Thank you very much for watching, guys. I'll see you later.